Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. Baha'u'llah. No matter how far the material world advances, it cannot establish the happiness of mankind. Only when material and spiritual civilization are linked and coordinated will happiness be assured. For in material civilization, good and evil advance together and maintain the same pace. Therefore, the material and the divine civilizations must progress together until the highest aspirations and desires of humanity shall become realized. Abdul Baha.
Thank you. So today we're really happy to have Mr. Alonzo Wind, and he'll be talking about the Baha'i Faith's role in social and economic development. Mr. Wind is a senior leader with over 40 years of worldwide experience in the international development and humanitarian assistance arenas with the U.S. government and international NGO organizations on long and short-term assignments in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He is affiliate faculty in the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. He's a retired senior foreign service officer from the U.S. Agency for International Development, having worked for 2 decades on diplomatic assignments with USAID primarily overseas. Most recently, he served 2 years until December 2023 as the International Medical Corps Mission Director in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories. Mr. Wind is the author of the recent book, A Jew in Gaza, Humanitarian Heartbreak, Hubris, and Horrors, providing meaningful and thoughtful insights on the conflict between Gaza and the Palestinians in Israel. And an earlier Amazon bestseller, Andean Adventures, An Unexpected Search for Meaning. He's from a Jewish background and is a longstanding member of the Baha'i community. He accepted the Baha'i faith in Bolivia in 1985. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Wind.
Thank you very much, and I'm so happy to be able to join you today. Let me share my screen. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to get some energetic questions as a result of this discussion. I appreciate the introduction. I won't go into it, what I have listed here, just to clarify that it's USAID. The U.S. Agency for International Development. I'm going to try to link together how I came to know of the Baha'i faith as well as Baha'i approaches to social and economic development, since across much of my life, really the two intersect. I'm going to try and discuss today as well what human development and evolution means in Baha'i thinking, in the Baha'i writings. If time permits, and if there's interest, I may refer to some Baha'i initiatives I came to know across the years, including a network of Baha'i radio stations, the creation of SAT groups in Latin America, and the founding of a Baha'i university in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and how all this came together. But first, let's go over some basics, an overview to the Baha'i faith, and some kudos to Management Associates in Sioux City, Iowa, for some borrowed slides that you'll see. The Baha'i faith was founded in the mid-1800s in what's now known as Iran, founded by Baha'u'llah, who Baha'is regard as the most recent messenger of God. It's a worldwide faith community numbering about 6 million across the globe. It's often described as being one of the most diverse religious communities around the world. The core principles are that of oneness of humanity, unity of religion, the independent investigation of truth, and progressive revelation. Progressive revelation is one that perhaps is unfamiliar to some who may be new to hearing about the Baha'i faith, but it's the concept of that each of the revealed religions around the world, in fact, come from the same source and build upon each other according to time, circumstance, and culture over thousands of years. Baha'i Faith has no clergy. It uses elected institutions at every level. It's engaged globally across a range of important issues, including education, gender equality, health, and community development. It's collaborated from the very start with the United Nations. It's known for the principles of service to humanity and consultation. Decision making is through collective consultation of elected bodies. And core activities in each community can include things like study circles, devotional gatherings, children's classes, junior youth empowerment programs, open to all, not just Baha'is. Baha'is are recognized at the United Nations and in fact, are organized as a recognized non-governmental organization, actively engaged in supporting key issues, progressive issues of gender equality, education, justice, as well as racial harmony. The emphasis is always on service and collective action. I'm going to share a couple of quotations from the Baha'i writings to complement the ones given earlier. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. And this is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out unto men, the day in which his most mighty grace hath been infused into all created things. Both of these are from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith. Now, I'd like to talk about how my search, in terms of trying to come to know the possibilities in terms of spiritual enlightenment meshed really with my pursuit of a vocation. I'd always wanted to join the Peace Corps, really from an early age. But I'd expected I would go off, serve 2 years, and then return to the States to a regular career. I was, in fact, recruited for the Peace Corps Rural Health Program in Ecuador. And in my time there, I saw really the most abject poverty, malnutrition, lack of education, but I also saw incredible welcoming people, friendship and warmth and a desire to grow more and to help build successful communities. And I ended up staying on in Ecuador for 5 years, going on to other countries in Latin America. I also came in contact in Ecuador with the Baha'i message. And indeed, over time, the Baha'i message and Baha'i teachings are what really made the most sense to me and connected not only with my spiritual pursuits, but also with my own professional growth and growing desire to work within international development. In Ecuador, after Peace Corps, I stayed on with an international NGO, what was then known as Foster Parents Plan. And I was leading a group of health promoters, social promoters in one of the provinces of Ecuador when the USAID mission, the U.S. Agency for International Development office in Quito, actually called me and asked for a favor. He asked if I would be willing to take a group of social promoters from one part of the country up to Otavalo to learn about this rather unique and special development program that they were supporting. I accepted and ended up finding out about Radio Baha'i, the Baha'i radio station in Otavalo, a few hours north of Quito. It was really rather remarkable, an eye-opening experience. The radio station was just outside of town, and it was really one huge nonprofit private development project that over the course of 10 years had captured over 85% of the rural market in terms of radio listeners and a large part of the urban market as well. The organizers were Baha'i teachers, pioneers from both abroad as well as within Ecuador. They'd created an authentic community education project with local music and culture, educational messages in health, literacy, agriculture, small animal husbandry. It really inspired me and exposed me to a progressive approach to community development, community education, and literacy work that inspired my work on across the years. But it also left me mildly curious in terms of wanting to know more about what the Baha'i faith was. But over time, I was exposed to, in different countries, really a wide range of development projects. I worked for 5 years in Ecuador, 5 years in Bolivia, several years in Peru. I would end up going to Peru, and that was a seminal moment as well, and would go on to serve actually in countries in Africa as well as the Middle East. But I would see often development projects that would sometimes struggle to launch, others that would seem to fail. And I wondered, why did so many fail? Why did donors finance and support projects that didn't necessarily have the basis to succeed, not to mention sustainability? This was very important to me as a professional and something that I saw over the course of years. I saw that many projects treated people like empty vessels, where knowledge was just being pumped into them as if they were empty vessels, filling people up with knowledge. And I wondered, how could that work? Did that work? Were Baha'i efforts any different? And if so, how? What made them different? And I came to realize that the most successful human development, community development projects around the world had certain special characteristics, which you might call a special sauce, a certain combination to be able to go forward and, if they were lucky, to be able to spread their success to a wider pool of people. I realized that it didn't necessarily matter how much money was spent on a particular project community. It depended on investments in what I saw as a three-legged stool approach, three supports for a project that came about at the same time to mutually reinforce each other. You had to strengthen and address the value of virtues, of changing people's values and slowly erase the effects of bad practices so that within a community, within a region, people could actually come to trust each other and themselves. Institutions were also important. You had to look to being able to not just generate knowledge, but you needed to be able to ensure that there were effective, efficient, honest government structures, community structures to be able to manage and carry forth different types of development projects. People had to believe in a program. They had to take full ownership. They had to believe it was coming from them as well, and not only from the outside. And what I saw over the course of the years in what we might call the um, secular world was that lip service could be given to some or all of these, but not always were the secular projects necessarily showing this combination of values that were key in terms of success or failure. Now, I'm not claiming that all Baha'i projects necessarily succeeded this way. Some failed, a number did, but many did succeed. I came to recognize in Latin America, as well as in other parts of the world, that Baha'i projects, projects supported by Baha'i communities, were by their very nature focused on teaching values and principles, and then organizing the local institutions and expanding that knowledge. One of the early Baha'i development programs that I came to be aware of was Universidad Nur, this Baha'i-inspired university in eastern Bolivia, now about to celebrate its 40th anniversary. It was, in fact, an inspiration for me, along with the network of Baha'i radio stations and other Baha'i efforts across Latin America, to see how I could improve the work that was being done in the different non-governmental organizations that I was working in, and then ultimately within the US government as a career USAID officer. Now, successful projects could be faith-based or secular ones, but the degree of long-term success was always going to be key to the linkage of knowledge, values, and institutions. Many Baha'i writings and teachings actually directly address human and community development. And this was an inspiration to me. I became Baha'i in Bolivia, in fact, through a whole chain of synchronicity and circumstances that I won't get into at this particular talk. But I became Baha'i at the start of my first 5 years in Bolivia, and I was inspired there by seeing the efforts of Baha'is in Bolivia, a country which at that time was already almost 5% Baha'i, according to some statistics, applying the teachings of the Baha'i Faith, the writings of the Baha'i Faith, to very important ground level development efforts. Now, Baha'i writings offered guidance from the 19th century. One of really my first mentors in the Baha'i Faith, Aloy Anello, talked repeatedly about the secret of divine civilization. It was written in the late 1800s in what was then Ottoman Empire Palestine by Abdul Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i Faith, who gave certain principles of development extracted from the writings of his father, Baha'u'llah, who had directed himself in a series of writings and tablets to the rulers of the earth. Abdul Baha's book offered an integrated and insightful program, focusing a great deal on universal education. And it would be fair to say that he was one of the first to actually call out for the need for universal education in the impoverished developing world. He called for the eradication of ignorance, extremism, and fanaticism. I found it to be a comprehensive guide, and I found that that book, along with many other writings from the central figures of the Baha'i Faith, spoke to me really with an important clarity and focus. Now, the spiritual foundation at the very heart of Baha'i development is a revolutionary premise that the secrets of the whole economic question are divine in nature and are concerned with the world of the heart and spirit. This isn't merely philosophical or theological speculation. It really offers a fundamental reorientation of how we understand it. Overall, the foundational principle of Baha'i development work is the concept of unity of mankind. Baha'u'llah himself taught that the purpose for which mortal men have from utter nothingness stepped into the realm of being is that they may work for the betterment of the world and live together in concord and harmony. I mean, this really establishes the service to humanity as the fundamental purpose of human existence. The core values include justice as the operating principle. Justice isn't merely one value among others, it's an organizing principle that makes development possible. The Baha'i International Community, which is a non-governmental organization connected with the United Nations, explains that justice provides the means capable of harnessing human potential to eradicate poverty. Gender equality, which early on was identified as a prerequisite for peace. Abdul Baha used a metaphor talking about how important gender equality was, using the image of the world of humanity having two wings. One is women and the other men. Not until both wings are equally developed can the bird fly. This principle doesn't mean, well, I should say this principle refers to, sorry, I lost track of myself in the writing. But the other key principle was that of eliminating extremes of wealth and poverty. Abdul Baha taught, under this adjustment, there can be no extremes in human conditions as regards wealth and substance. This principle, as well as others, has driven decades of Baha'i advocacy at the United Nations and has been at the center of Baha'i development programs around the world. This doesn't mean absolute equality, of course, but ensuring basic dignity and opportunity while allowing for natural differences in capacity. Other key principle is that of universal participation. Development is not something that one group of people does for the other. The Universal House of Justice, which is the central leading body of the Baha'i community worldwide, states that every member of the human family has not only the right to benefit from a materially and spiritually prosperous civilization, but also an obligation to contribute towards its construction. Unity in diversity. This is key. Baha'u'llah wrote, "Close your eyes to racial differences and welcome all with the light of oneness." This is a principle that has animated Baha'i communities across the world, and Baha'i communities really pioneered racial integration efforts, including the establishment of as early as Race Unity Day in 1957, making the Baha'i Faith one of the first religious communities to systematically address racism. And in fact, the son of the founder of the faith, Abdul Baha, when he traveled to the United States in 1912, directly addressed the convention of the NAACP, one of the first to really openly take um, uh, visible action speaking out against racism. Now, what else makes the Baha'i approach distinctive in the development field? It also includes material and spiritual coherence, addressing both dimensions at the same time, a learning orientation in terms of reflection, adaptation, iteration, long-term commitment, looking to build sustainable capacity over time, and a values-based approach in terms of looking to moral and spiritual development as well as material progress. The Universal House of Justice has written, "The oneness of mankind implies the achievement of a dynamic coherence between the spiritual and practical requirements of life on earth. The vision of a world civilization that is materially prosperous, spiritually fulfilling, environmentally sustainable, and socially just guides all Baha'i development efforts." Now, we try to learn from global experience, and there's such a diversity of Baha'i development projects around the world, from rural Colombia to urban India, post-conflict societies to established democracies, all working to test on a local level how these universal principles can be applied. Abdul Baha concluded in The Secret of Divine Civilization, which I'd referred to earlier, these words: "Nothing whatsoever can be regarded as unattainable. Endeavor, ceaseless endeavor is required. Nothing short of an indomitable determination can possibly achieve it all." That determination is evident today in classrooms in Haiti, villages in India, rural communities in Bolivia and Colombia, here in the United States, in Brazil, where people are discovering how to transform society step by step with the transformation of hearts in their local community. Key principles of value-based development include the oneness of humanity, and as I mentioned before, universal participation. This principle of universal participation, where all people, regardless of background, are seen as protagonists in the development of their communities rather than passive recipients of aid. The integration of material and spiritual advancement, looking to emphasize spiritual values such as honesty, equity, justice, and service, with material aspects like education, health, and economic activity. The Baha'i International Community has written, "Development in the Baha'i view is an organic process in which the spiritual is expressed and carried out in the material." Building capacity and empowerment. In every level, Baha'i development seeks to build capacity at the individual level as well as the community level, trying to encourage moral qualities, self-reliance, self-initiative, opportunities to increase people's ability to take charge of their own development, as well as collective learning. Social justice and the elimination of extremes. A key part of the Baha'i teachings is that a just society, according to Baha'i teachings, eliminates extremes of wealth and poverty and establishes the equality of men. Baha'i teachings on economics and social life stress these principles. The harmony of science and religion, because we see science and religion as complementary and mutually reinforcing. They can't contradict each other. Both are essential for the advancement of civilization. And learning and service should be central motives for any development initiative. Now, some examples of the global expression of these initiatives have included experiences like Nur University in Bolivia, Fundayek, the Foundation for the Application and Teaching of the Sciences in Colombia, all looking to integrate academic, moral, and vocational training, as well as supporting the creation of a rural university, the generation of knowledge on the community level. Women's empowerment programs, community building activities. All of these projects started at local levels and grew organically as community members gained confidence and skills. As I mentioned before, locally, we try to promote inclusive community consultation and decision making, grassroots projects, programs that support the building of unity and diversity and consciously removing prejudice, promoting mutual support, as well as recognizing the need that communities draw upon their own cultural strengths while upholding universal principles. Now, Baha'i programs and the Baha'i teachings offer really a distinctive vision. Baha'i involvement in social and economic development is rooted in faith and scripture. As Baha'u'llah said, the purpose for which mortal men have from utter nothingness stepped into the realm of being is that they may work for the betterment of the world and live together in concord and harmony. It's not just about economic growth, but it's about fostering the physical, social, and spiritual connections and prosperity of communities. Abdul Baha, the son of the founder of the faith, talks about the two calls to success and prosperity. One is the call of civilization, the other is the soul stirring call of God, on which depends the eternal happiness of humanity, the Word of God. One of the examples that I think is really most resonant to me is this. Material civilization is like a lamp glass. Divine civilization is the lamp itself, and the glass without the light is dark. Material civilization is like the body, it is dead. Divine civilization is the spirit, and the body gets its life from the spirit. When I was learning initially about the Baha'i faith and studying it in the first months, I was drawn to the idea of progressive revelation in Baha'i terms, often described in these terms, that the same lamp through the ages serves as a divine light illumination. And it's only the lampshade that changes over time according to the needs and social circumstances. The revelation of Baha'u'llah looks to the organic and spiritual unity of the whole body of nations. This is a sign for the coming of age of the entire human race. One of the really most remarkable statements I have read is written by Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, who was the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah, who wrote that the Baha'i faith should be seen as the last and highest stage in the stupendous evolution of man's collective life on this planet, the emergence of a world community, the consciousness of world citizenship, the founding of a world civilization and culture. All of these represent a vision that really animates and underlies as a foundation Baha'i development efforts. Above all, it's that of building a human system, a group of human systems around the world, local communities, all trying to focus on their development. Now, there are historical examples from the very beginning of Baha'i social and economic development initiatives in 19th century Iran. The Baha'i community was really the first to set up schools for both girls and boys, and in fact to prioritize the education of girls, recognizing in girls the mothers of the future generation. It promoted literacy, established philanthropic efforts long before these were common practices, not only in Iran, but really across most societies. In the modern era, many Baha'i efforts in social and economic development were energized with a 1983 directive from the Universal House of Justice, which encouraged Baha'is to think about developing development projects that look to education, healthcare, agriculture, empowerment of women, as well as community radio. It's estimated that in 2017, there were an estimated 40,000 different local projects with about 1,400 sustained projects, including schools and radio stations, and more than 130 Baha'i-inspired civil society development organizations worldwide. And that number increased in 2022 to 170. And it's estimated that by 2026, there'll be some form of sustained Baha'i community development activity in around 14,000 population clusters around the world, with service-oriented projects and social action projects. Baha'i projects often seek to cooperate with different partners, including local governments, national governments, the United Nations, to push for community participation and local capacity building, non-partisanship, and Baha'i projects will always avoid proselytizing, sustainability, and long-term self-sufficiency. Baha'u'llah wrote, "Noble have I created thee, yet thou hast abased thyself. Rise then unto that for which thou wast created." This basic underlying nobility speaks to the fact that all people, regardless of race, gender, or background, have the same spiritual capacity for growth, the virtues that can be cultivated and manifested for the advancement of civilization. We look to the dual nature of humanity, both the higher spiritual as well as the lower material nature. Real development means looking to manifest spiritual virtues on a community level, just such as justice, love, and truthfulness. Growth-centered efforts in terms of trying to support the advancement of human nature. Recognizing that within communities, you have stages of growth, and sometimes that may mean backsliding, that may mean going backwards briefly before going forward. That parallels on a community level an individual's growth from infancy to adulthood. Baha'i texts suggest that humanity is now reaching the threshold of collective maturity, able to build a peaceful and unified global civilization. On a social development level of service to others, we try to encourage the concept of service, recognizing that true advancement is achieved when individuals dedicate their talents to improving their communities. Cooperation, development requires on a community level participation, collaboration, local initiative. The principle of human unity, the oneness of mankind, of humankind, underpinning all social and economic development, promoting solidarity and peace. All of these together have to go hand in hand within Baha'i approaches. Baha'i development projects will typically exemplify universal access to knowledge, equality, community participation, and moral empowerment. The social dimension requires a recognition that we need to support service where individuals dedicate their talents to improving their communities, cooperation where development on a local level requires participation, collaboration, and local initiative, and oneness, the principle of human unity underpinning all. Now, there's a harmony. There needs to be a harmony between evolution and spiritual purpose. Abdu'l-Bahá's teachings describe humans as having always possessed a distinct latent capacity for spiritual consciousness, even as the human form developed gradually over time. This unique view positions evolution as both a biological and a spiritual process unfolding according to divine intentions. There are principles that shape development strategies. Organic gradual growth means that human and social development are believed to occur by gradual stages, paralleling the biological process of evolution. Programs are designed for incremental progress, capacity building, and lifelong learning rather than quick fixes. A recognition of inherent human potential, where every person is seen as possessing latent spiritual and intellectual capacities, analogous to a seed's potential to becoming a tree. Development strategies aim to nurture these capacities at every stage, focusing on material as well as spiritual education. And unity of material and spiritual progress. Since evolution is viewed as a process governed by divine law, there's a conviction that material advancement should proceed hand in hand with spiritual and moral development. Social and economic projects therefore aim to foster virtues such as cooperation, justice, and service, alongside tangible skills and knowledge. Social development is seen as a marker for collective evolution, the Baha'i view that we are in constant movement towards an ever advancing civilization. Human civilization is understood to be passing through the sort of stages, as I mentioned before, of an individual's growth from infancy to collective maturity. This is a key part of Baha'i understanding of the process of development over time. So social development strategies look to those practices that work to best support this sort of growth and evolution. Now, at the same time, we explicitly reject those models that imply social Darwinism or competitive models of development, but we try to affirm the dignity of all people and prioritize strategies of cooperation and mutual upliftment and the elimination of prejudice. Material civilization should be seen as a means, not an end. Baha'i teachings affirm that material progress, technology, wealth, and infrastructure is valuable, but only when unified with spiritual purpose. Abdu'l-Baha explains in his writings that materialist civilization is one of the means for the progress of the world of mankind. Yet until it becomes combined with divine civilization, the desired result, which is the felicity of mankind, will not be attained. Material civilization is like a lamp glass. Divine civilization is the lamp itself, and the glass without the light is ultimately dark. There's a practical interdependence between material means for spiritual aims, service as a bridge, moral transformation for lasting progress. Service, the Baha'i writings teach us that daily work and social action, when done in a spirit of service, unite spiritual and material pursuits. Acts such as seeking education, providing healthcare, working for justice, and building community are both spiritually meaningful and materially constructive. And moral transformation is really key, because only when individual and collective actions are motivated by spiritual principles, justice, compassion, trustworthiness, can society achieve material prosperity that results in lasting happiness and unity. According to the Bahá'í Faith, the path to true civilization and peace is through the harmonious advancement of both the material and spiritual dimensions of life. Material achievements are the foundation, but it's the infusion of spiritual values that gives society purpose and lasting prosperity. This means promoting education, justice, and welfare alongside nurturing virtues such as love, generosity, and unity. The Universal House of Justice wrote to the Baha'is of the world in 2007 that the world order of Baha'u'llah is the divinely ordained system for which nations and people so desperately search. The order is without precedent in human history for its standard of justice and its commitment to the practical realization of the oneness of mankind, as well as its capacity to promote change and the advancement of world civilization. Mankind's ordered life have been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, wrote Baha'u'llah, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. The world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Above all, we understand that we have to have an effort of will that will be galvanized by a vision of human prosperity in the fullest sense of the term, an awakening to the possibilities of spiritual and material well-being. In The Prosperity of Humankind, written to the Baha'i world by the Universal House of Justice, indeed really to the nations of the world, the Universal House of Justice wrote that it is unrealistic to imagine the vision of the next stage in the advancement of civilization can be formulated without a searching re-examination of the attitudes and assumptions that currently underlie approaches to social and economic development. It requires a radical rethinking of most of the concepts and assumptions currently governing social and economic life. If humanity is indeed coming of age, if all the inhabitants of the planet constitute a single people, if justice is to be the ruling principle of social organization, then existing conceptions that were born out of ignorance of these emerging realities have to be recast. But movement in this direction has barely begun. I'd like to close with another quote from Baha'u'llah. Let your vision be world embracing, rather than confined to your own selves. Baha'u'llah wrote, do not busy yourselves in your concerns. Let your thoughts be fixed upon that which will rehabilitate the fortunes of mankind and sanctify the hearts and souls of men. It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is one country and mankind its citizens. This really speaks to me and was key to my own study of the Baha'i teachings. I have a bunch of references in this PowerPoint for those that are interested. And I'd like to stop there and thank you very much and leave it open for some questions.
Thank you so much. Now, if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat and we'll have time for Q&A. Okay, so one question is, how can individuals in urban, highly industrialized societies contribute to grassroots development in their own communities? Oh, sorry, you're muted right now.
Sorry, there we go. That's a good question, and it is very much happening now. Really, within the um, Baha'i community, there are um, hundreds, if not thousands, of efforts in urban communities um, tackling manageable small development problems that they can handle on a local community level. It's true here in the States, as well as in Brazil, as well as in many different countries around the world. I know of really a multiplicity of communities that have tried to undertake things like food banks in terms of addressing the needs of the impoverished within a community while supporting community gardens that might be more sustainable in terms of being able to meet the food needs within a given community, supporting children's classes and junior youth classes in terms of complementing the type of education that might be available through schools. There are Baha'i efforts at promoting public health initiatives, vaccination campaigns. This is true not only within the developing world, but I think increasingly as communities in the States have been facing pressures with really a let up of vaccination efforts uh, to remind people of the importance of vaccinating their children. Um, the important thing is trying to look to the problems that a community has and breaking them down into chunks that might be most manageable and then building from there so that they can potentially grow larger and more disseminated.
Thank you. Um, what is the proper thing for an assembly to do in this formative time if its policies perpetuate an injustice?
I'm not sure I fully understood that question.
Maybe if the person who asked that can expand a little bit, maybe give an
Which
example.
are the policies? I mean, in terms of fighting injustice, at which level?
Yeah. How can we establish a socioeconomic project based on Baha'i principles in our own localities? How do we start?
Well, I think that kind of goes back to what I was just talking about. We, at a community level, of course, problems can sometimes seem overwhelming. The important thing is starting small. Now, typically, Baha'i communities um, will first start in the area of education, particularly the education of the children, the education of the youth. And they will look to the use of teaching materials that will expose children and youth to not only the writings, the Baha'i writings, but also to help them think logically, to learn how to learn and how to think on their own. And then I think the next step, um, particularly for junior youth and as youth get older, is to look to service activities, to try to inculcate from early on that sense of familiarity and to exercise that muscle of service so that people will carry it forth later on in life. I think, from my own experience within communities in Latin America, in Bolivia, in Brazil, in Ecuador and Peru, very often, particularly in rural communities, there were efforts at trying to support rural agriculture by learning how to plant in ways to be able to improve the soil and to regenerate the land, to not expose it necessarily to the damage of commercial agricultural practices. really, I mean, it depends on the particular circumstances of needs of any given community. There is really a wealth of material available, um, both within, of course, the Baha'i community, but also what I would say the Baha'i inspired community in terms of practices that could be taken on to support the betterment of a community. I know when I was, after I finished my Peace Corps service, I came into contact with a whole series of studies and experiments conducted by the University of Massachusetts Amherst School of Education in terms of literacy. And it included different initiatives such as the use of social promoters and the use of radio education. And it wasn't until, in fact, some years later that I came to understand that this, in fact, had been inspired by a series of Baha'i faculty members at that School of Education.
Thank you. So the previous question about the policies that perpetuate injustice, it says policies that are applied to Baha'i individuals that actually harm individuals, in Assembly's zeal to build Baha'i standards and culture.
Let me take a look at this directly. Policies that are applied to Baha'i individuals that actually harm individuals in Assembly's zeal to build Baha'i standards or culture. You know, I think I'm reminded to a certain extent of something that a wise elderly Baha'i member told me some years ago about Baha'is. You can't judge the Baha'i teachings necessarily by Baha'is, but you have to judge it really by the writings, by the principles, the teachings. I think within the description that was given to me by this elderly person was that the Baha'i faith is sort of like a bright light in your backyard. It illuminates your backyard. It illuminates the darkness, but like any bright light in the dark, it also can sometimes bring out any manner of weird bugs and insects. And I understood that to mean that really you can sometimes find Baha'is bringing perhaps their zeal and enthusiasm of their outside pursuits and try to adapt these to to their Baha'i communities without necessarily a strong foundation in terms of what the teachings and the principles of the Baha'i faith are and the guidance from the Universal House of Justice.
Thank you. The next question is, when starting social justice projects with non-Baha'i partners, the challenge has been to see the three-legged stool approach in a unified light. Any suggestions based on your experience about reaching consensus and agreement?
I think it's very important to be humble. I think Baha'is that are looking to participate in interreligious efforts should, as a matter of course, approach any interaction and discussion from a sense of they by no means necessarily have an answer for a given situation, but through the consultation and discussion with partners, they can often find perhaps more workable solutions rather than trying to impose necessarily a model from the outside. I think it's essential for Baha'is to look for ways of working with a variety of like-minded organizations that seek similar progressive values and social justice concerns. And you know, as an example, perhaps this is not the best example, but one example that Abdul Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i Faith, gives us is that if you encounter somebody with 9 good qualities and 1 bad quality, close your eyes to the 1 bad quality and focus on the 9. If you encounter somebody with 9 bad qualities and 1 good quality, focus on that 1 good quality and see how you can build from there. In an imperfect world, we're always going to run into people with very different and divergent points of view. And I think if we approach partnerships and associations with humility and with sincerity, of not trying to impose our own agenda, it can make for more successful partnerships. And sometimes if partnerships don't work, it also requires courage to recognize that something's not working and to perhaps stop it and look to some way to iterate, to build on that again at a different time in another way.
Thank you. What are the biggest obstacles you see to integrating spiritual principles into mainstream economic systems today, and how can they be overcome?
So I think one of the biggest obstacles that I've seen over time is, of course, where there's a natural tendency to equate spiritual principles with religious proselytizing, with missionary activities. And we're not talking about anything like that. We're uh, also looking to uh, see how we can reach partnerships and alliances with people who have come to terms with the failure of mainstream development efforts that often have been overcome and beset by corruption and abuses of authority, abuses of leadership, and to talk about how working on a grassroots level at promoting these sorts of virtues and spiritual principles, however we care to call them, uh, can often help ensure greater success in terms of the long-term sustainability of different development efforts. I think in the mainstream world, there's been, over the last few decades, an increasing recognition that it's not enough to just look to the very materialistic inputs that may go into a development project. And I saw this uh, true with what developed in terms of the work of my former agency, the U.S. Agency for International Development, which unfortunately in the current administration has been um, essentially dismantled. Um, but for at least the last 20 years, 25 years, there had been increasing efforts at supporting faith-based development efforts explicitly, and to try to encourage partnerships between U.S. government funding on the one hand with faith-based and civil society organizations on the other, with the understanding that this could often lead to better outcomes over time.
Thank you. The next question is, how does the Baha'i approach to development adapt to diverse cultural contexts without imposing a one-size-fits-all model?
Well, the Baha'i approach really celebrates the diversity of different cultures. There's not, if I understood correctly, the question, if you're operating on a grassroots level, on a local level, rather than trying to bring something in from the outside, you necessarily are going to have to design an effort that will take into account local cultural realities and the distinctions that they may require.
Thank you. Another question is, would not the dismantling of the USAID be a great opportunity for the Baha'i efforts at the grassroots? Can you please comment?
Well, I myself am very troubled by the damage being done globally. I mean, I'm not going to get into a partisan discussion, of course, or a political discussion, but I am very much involved in terms of documenting and recognizing in our advocacy for things like humanitarian assistance and development that there's been, unfortunately, some tragic misunderstandings uh, within the American political system and within really American society as a whole. I mean, I recall that there were studies done a number of years ago asking people in these surveys, how much do you think is being spent by the US government on development assistance, on foreign aid, and the like? And people came back with, oh, it's too much. 25% is probably being spent of the federal budget on that. And they would then be asked as a follow-up, well, how much do you think should be spent? And invariably, the response would be something along the lines of, well, I think 5 or 10% of our government resources should be dedicated to things like that, to addressing human need and suffering, eradicating poverty, and fighting disease. When in reality, I mean, the USAID budget and in fact, other agencies working in international development and foreign assistance, along with USAID, represented less than 1% of the federal budget. So there was a terrible incapacity of that agency to really help people understand how much resources were really being spent within a given activity. Now, ultimately, this is a struggle that goes on. I think for many civil society organizations, secular or spiritually inspired, there's a need to be able to recognize, okay, what sort of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where we address things like HIV/AIDS, malaria, measles, and other infectious diseases around the world? The fact that in some countries in Africa, Ebola once again is raising its head, but without the support from CDC or USAID in terms of tackling it. Do we want to address the fact that as a country we have something like $500 million of food aid sitting at ports and rotting away and not being used? I think it requires an advocacy and a development education, one that combines what is the actual individual efforts that we can do as people, as members of civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, people of goodwill, members of the Baha'i community, in terms of trying to ensure that we don't fail to take into account how protecting the well-being and promoting the development of others in more needy countries around the world can come back and haunt us in terms of the future of America as well. I mean, I think there's an invariable need for us to be able to focus at the same time on the practical realities of the sorts of challenges and problems that we're facing in society today, in a world where the US government has virtually eliminated development assistance and humanitarian assistance. And the same thing is beginning to happen in countries like the United Kingdom and elsewhere. And yet we're really on the threshold of even potentially more difficult problems that we've completely dropped, things like climate change and what that may represent for all of mankind.
Thank you. Do we have any final questions? I'll wait for a minute and see if we have any more.
And forgive me for having rushed through a bunch of those slides. I had a bunch of other slides as well, talking specifically about experiences in Latin America, but I didn't think time would allow. Maybe another time.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely have you back and you can expand more on that. It's very interesting. Okay, well, I think that's all of our questions. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your experience and your insights on this. And yeah, this talk will be on our channel. And so I'll put the link to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe for free. And I'll also put our mailing list in there if you'd like to be notified about these live talks. Thank you, everyone. And our speaker next week will be Dr. Robert Henderson, and he will be discussing the impending unity of the world as predicted by the Baha'i writings. So we'll see you there. It'll be at 12 p.m. Eastern time, and hope you have a great week. Thank you. Bye.